His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. And then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk, and Harry swung off of it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him? Seamus whispered. Can't have, Hagrid said, his voice shaking. Can't nothing interfere with the broomstick, except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. What are you doing? Moaned Ron, gray-faced. I knew it, Hermione gasped. Snape, look. Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. He's doing something, chasing the broom, said Hermione. What should we do? Leave it to me. Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard that it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd was on its feet, watching, terrified as the Weasleys flew up and tried to pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. Come on, Hermione, Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across to the stand where Snape stood, and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright bluish flame shot from her wand into the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her that she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto his broom. Neville, you can look, Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand to his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell out of his hand. I got the snitch, he shouted, waving it above his head, and then the game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it, he nearly swallowed it, Flint said, still howling 20 minutes later. But it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any of the rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry had heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong black tea in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. It was Snape, Ron was explaining. Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering he wouldn't take his eyes off you. Rubbish, said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. Why would Snape do something like that? Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. I found out something about him, he told Hagrid. He tried to get past that 3-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him, and we think he's trying to steal whatever it's guarding. Hagrid dropped the teapot. How do you know about Fluffy? He said. Fluffy? Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard that. Yes? Harry said eagerly. No, don't ask me anymore, said Hagrid gruffly. That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it. Rubbish, said Hagrid. Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort. So why did he just try and kill Harry? Cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact. And Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him. I'm telling you, you're wrong, said Hagrid hotly. I don't know why Harry's broomstick acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try to kill a student. Now, listen to me, all 3 of you. You're meddling in things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guarded. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Aha! So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? Hagrid looked furious with himself. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erised. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs as they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver mail had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the great hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy, and bitter wind rattled the windows in the classroom. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel sorry," said Draco Malfoy one potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that the Slytherins had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he realized nobody found this funny because they were all so impressed at the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come around the week before making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of Potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking up, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "No, I'm all right. Thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" Ken Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are trying to earn some extra money, Weasley. Hoping to be gamekeeping yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose. That hut of Hagrid's must seem a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Weasley!" Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. "He was provoked," Professor Snape said, Hagrid sticking his huge hairy face from behind the tree. "Malfoy was insulted his family." "Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules," Hagrid said Snape silkily. "5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you." Crabbe, Malfoy, and Goyle pushed roughly past the trees, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy, and Snape. "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat." So the three of them followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with Christmas decorations. "Ah, Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no less than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days you got left until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione. "And that reminds me. Hurry, Ron, we've got a half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh, yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays? Bit keen, aren't you?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I told you to drop it. It's nothing to you what that dog's guarding. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry asked. "We must have been through hundreds of books already, and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I read his name somewhere." "I'm saying nothing," said Hagrid flatly. "We'll just have to find out ourselves then," said Ron, and left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had been searching in books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't a great wizard of the 20th century, or notable magic names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library, tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strode off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a specially assigned note from one of the teachers to look at any of the restricted books, and he knew he'd never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic never taught in Hogwarts, and only read by older students studying advanced defensive against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madam Pince, the librarian, burnished a feather duster at him. You better get out then. Go on, out. Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up some story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they better not ask Madam Pince where they could find them. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They'd been looking for 2 weeks, and after all, but as they only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madam Pince breathing down their necks.